Um, so just to explain it, on regular property tax, they assess the value of the land, they assess the value of the building, they add the two together, and they tax it all at the same rate. And what it does with land tax, usually we replace building tax with land tax because it's the simplest, because the two are connected together. And so what it does is you assess the value of the land, you assess the value of the building, then you start charging a lower rate on the building and a higher rate on the land to get the same amount of money. And eventually the goal is to have no tax on the building and all of it on the land. But you can also replace other taxes with land value tax, because there are other things that you want to encourage besides building buildings. But that's basically the concept. It's just like a property tax, but only on the value of the land. And the value is the important word, because 2 square meters in downtown New York, in the prime areas, is more than 1 hectare of average New York State farmland. So when you think land, you think area, and that's why people think it hurts the farmers, but it's really on the value. And the ratio of building value to land value is actually lower in the center of the city than it is in the city generally, because the land value is so much higher. And then it's lower in the city, or it's higher, the land share is higher in the city than it is in the suburbs, and it's higher in the suburbs than it is in the farming areas. So in Pennsylvania, where we do studies, the farmers, most of them, not all of them, and in some places not even half, but in other places most of them, pay less under land value tax than they do under property tax. The farmers near cities tend to pay more. And they're the ones we hear from, because they're near cities. It's easier for them to make that case. The different ways you can have a national land value tax or a provincial land value tax or county tax or a municipal tax. And one of the things, if you're worried about the farmers, you can use some of that tax revenue to reduce the VAT on food, which is what the farmer grows. But in Pennsylvania, they only gave authority for land value tax in cities, because they didn't want any farmers to pay more. The Farm Bureau, which is the big lobby for farmers, didn't want any farmers to pay more. So we said, well, a lot of farmers will pay less, and they said, if one farmer pays more, we're going to stop this. So we just said, okay, we'll do it in cities, and boroughs we have cities, boroughs, and townships. And the townships are the most rural, and the cities are urban, and then the places surrounding the cities are usually boroughs. So the cities have it and the boroughs have it, but other places don't have the option. And we can create land trust communities and leave the government out of it, where some large landowner took his land and said, I'm going to lease out the land, and some of the revenue I collect as rent, I will rebate your taxes with it, or I'll provide, already a lot of landowners will, like an apartment complex, the owner will have his own swimming pool, he'll have to pave all the streets are private, but you can do additional things in a land trust community, and the private landlord can turn over the governing to the people who live there, and it becomes like a municipality. But it has all the powers that a private landlord has, and if it also incorporates as a municipality, it has all the powers that a government, a standard municipality has. And then you do what if if a municipality is allowed to do something that a landlord is not, like have a police department, you do it through the municipal government. And if the land trust is allowed to do something that the municipality is not, you do it through the private landlord relationship. And then there are other taxes. The principle underlying land value tax is that the earth is a commons. And God or nature made the earth. You didn't make it. You didn't give it value. The people around you gave it value. The reason land in the center of the city is valuable is because of what all the people around them are doing. So the same idea, a pollution tax, when you hold land, you're excluding other people from enjoying that land. When you pollute the air or the water, you're excluding other people from enjoying that air or water as much as they would have. Everybody enjoys the water less because we're storing, we're renting you access to the water to keep your pollutants in, or to the air. So pollution taxes are on the same principle, and resource extraction taxes are on the same principle, that if you take the copper or the coal or the iron ore out of the ground, then nobody else can. So you pay the community for that, and the community has a right to say how fast it can be done. And the higher the tax, the slower people will take it out. So that's on the same principle, and we'll come to that with some things where it's better to charge a pollution tax or an extraction tax to solve to solve problems of pollution and resource depletion mostly. When we talk about the effect on the farmer, the first thing he wants to know is, will he pay more or pay less? That's the first thing anyone wants to know. But there's also how it will affect the price of farmland. And the person who wants to become a farmer wants the price of farmland to be going down. But the person who's already a farmer would be happier if it stayed up. And the person who's at the end of his farming career and is going to retire, he wants the farmland prices to be as high as possible. And of course, the people who want to be farmers are not organized. Politically, the people who are already farmers are organized. So the theory is that land value tax drives down farmland prices. But it plays out in particular ways. If one community goes to a land value tax, and all the people around them still tax buildings and the sale of food and all these other things, the farmland value will go down for all those other people, because people will start buying their food where it's not taxed. So it's actually when one local community goes to a land value tax, he lowers the price of land more for the other communities than for his own communities. And that's why a land trust can work for the landlord. That if the landlord says, I would say you have a very poor neighborhood or a slum that was a business district, the sod factory closed, whatever, and you have a very poor, distressed area, and the land isn't worth much, and you say, locate your business here, and of all the rent that I collect, I will use half the rent or 2/3 of the rent to rebate any taxes you generate. Well, you're going to attract people who are very productive, who generate a lot of taxes. And even if the landlord's getting 20% of the rent, 20% in a thriving community is more than 100% in a distressed community. Or if you create a village in a farming area, 20% of the rent in that village is much more than 100% of the rent when it was just a farm. So you can create these land trusts and do it profitably. Now, the indirect effects, if your customers, the people who understand this the most are retail merchants. And a lot of retail merchants, we have a sales tax in the United States, in most states. And they don't like the sales tax because it's worse that they have to collect it from their customers. Their customers are very aware that they're paying a higher tax on one side of the border than they are on the other side of the border. So most of the merchants would rather pay the tax themselves than make their customers pay it. And the effects on the general economy. If it's good for the economy, and indirectly that means it'll be good for your business, and even if you pay more, if business is doing well, it could be a good thing. The question is, how much are you willing to pay more to make the economy better? And so they're much more aware of the direct effects, but the indirect effects matter. That if you can convince people that the economy will keep getting better with this tax, then they don't mind nearly as much that they're paying more, because they're paying more and business is good. When we say how will it affect the farmer, there's very different kinds of farming. And this is one extreme to the other extreme. You might not have any farms like this in Sweden. That is the world's largest tractor. That's how I found that. I just Googled world's largest tractor. But that kind of farm is lots of land, very little labor. So when you take the taxes off of labor and put it on land, that farm is going to pay more. No way around it, because that farm, the whole organization of that farm is to have the least possible labor and get a crop. Doesn't matter how much land you hold. But this, on the other end, he's getting the most possible crop and the least possible land, and that's a lot of work. So when you untax labor and you increase the tax on land, or even when you untax buildings and increase the tax on land, you get more of this and less of that. And in between, there's lots of small farms have more buildings per, a farm that's 10 times as big will not have 10 times as much building value or 10 times as much machinery. It might have 3 times as much machinery and 2 times as much building, but it's 10 times as much land. So when you shift to a land value tax, you give the competitive advantage to the smaller farm. This is where Richard used to live, and he found these locations for me. But that is a farming area in the forest, and the farms probably would pay less because they have the only buildings there are farm buildings. So when you take the tax off the buildings, you're only taking it off of the farmers, and when you take and a few little villages. But when you put the tax on land, you're putting it on the forest land and the vacant land that somebody's holding that nobody's using. There is a question about forests because the trees should be counted as an improvement. If it's the first time if it's the natural, we call it virgin forest, but if it's never been cut before, it's pure natural forest, then you should charge a royalty to cut the trees, because the trees belong to the public for the same reason the land rightly belongs to the public. But once you've cut those trees down and you plant new trees, then there should be no more royalties. But also, when the assessor comes, he should assess the value of the trees separately and not tax that. So only the land would be taxed. And Oregon is our biggest forest state in the United States. Oregon is just north of California, and it produces more lumber than any other state for the size. And they had a problem when they had a high property tax. People were cutting the trees down before they were fully mature, and it wasn't as good of lumber, and then they were not as quick to replant. because as soon as you replant, you're paying property tax on the value of the trees. So Oregon exempted the value of the trees from taxation, and now the forests are better managed, and the trees are not cut down before they're mature. And the wood, the quality of the wood is better, is the main thing. He knows about lumber. The bigger the tree, the more, the center of the tree, when you cut it and dry it, will turn into a straight board. The edges of the tree, when you cut it and dry it, will warp. They will warp, I think, toward away from the center or something. I forget which it is. But whenever you buy cheap lumber and it's warped, you look at it and you see that it was cut from the outer edge of the tree. And when you allow the trees to get bigger, you get more what's called center cut wood. So it improves the quality of lumber for housing as well. These places probably pay more. This is Malmo on the left, and you can't quite see it, but that's Harbor Canal there, and these are all big farms. They're from the looks of it, it's monocropping farm. It's like that guy with the tractor, where they plant the same. They might plant a different crop each year, but at any one year, it's all the same crop. And that gets into different types. But some of them might pay less. The ones that are smaller have more buildings, but they probably pay more because they're next to Malmo. Or if they were next to Stockholm or Gothenburg, they would probably pay more. Just because that land is suitable for industry as well. And I don't know what, just east of Kirsenberg, it looked like it might actually be a golf course or a park or something. So I don't think that's a farm, the very green section. Now, this is a location that definitely pays more. Richard found this. What is that? What is the road? It's
Glömstavägen.
Anyhow, that's a fairly busy road, and that farmland, it's actually, after I copied this picture, it's actually even bigger. But all on the north side of that highway is housing. And he found housing selling on that road along that stretch for 3 to 4 million krona, which is, well, it doesn't matter what it is in dollars. I'm the only one who cares what it is in dollars. But the south side of that is all farm, and clearly he's making more money on the price of the land going up than he's making on the farming. And if that remains a farm, then somewhere further away from Stockholm and the places where these people work, they have to build houses further out into the real farm areas because he's hanging on to this. And so we say when we want to help the farmer keep his farm, I don't know that we want to help this farmer keep his farm. I think it's better for the economy if this farm becomes housing and the farms further out stay farms. So, and the market kind of decides these things. The tax is based on whatever the properties in that area are selling for. Oops, did I hit the up button instead? That gives you a better idea. That yellow thing is an outline of the picture we just saw, so that gives you a sense of where it is. Now, this is in the United States. A fellow, Mason Gaffney, he's an economist at the University of California, Riverside, and he's very focused on land values. time to change the clock, change